Recording. And I'm going to go ahead and share. Gus, I will end up going first, just because there might be more people typically come in the second half for the main topic presentations. I want this share. I'm going to do this. Cool. And where is? There you go. Never need to figure out how to disable that because PowerPoint likes going into closed captioning mode. So for our two topics this month, I will be starting out tonight with our first presentation on two astronomers of the month, John Bayer and Nicolas de Louis Lacaille. I'm abbreviating his name here. And then afterwards, Gus will be walking us through some stuff on binoculars. So a little bit different for this. I ended up having to pick two astronomers just because one of them I really could not find much of any information about. And we'll go ahead and start off with him first. So John Bayer. Some of you might recognize Bayer if you've heard of the Bayer designation or the Bayer star catalog. So John Bayer, really not much I was able to find on him. Kind of mysterious. There isn't an exact date for his birthday. He was born sometime in 1572 in Rhein, Germany. So German national, part of the Holy Roman Empire during this time. He would die on March 7th in 1625. So not quite a contemporary of Galileo, I believe. I really could not find anything on him. It was, despite having one of the more significant pieces of astronomical publications underneath his name. He never married, did not have any children, and I could not find any relationships on who his parents were or if they or social status or anything like that. So it was very. He at the age of 20. He would begin attending the University of, and I'm going to butcher this because it's German, of Ingolstadt to study law. He was not an astronomer by trade. It wasn't his main profession, which normally you would think of this time with the dominance of the Roman Catholic Church, it would be theology. So law is a bit of an interesting thing to crop up in these studies. There isn't anything I could find on it, whether or not he what level of degree he earned or when he completed his studies. I just know he has a degree in law. And after graduating, he would go on to serve as a lawyer for the Augsburg City Council. I could not find how long that was, but it was likely until his death, given the time period. So Bayer's only claim to fame for astronomy works is what's known as the Uranometria. It is significant because it is the first star atlas that covered both the northern and southern celestial sphere. So prior to this, most of it was still based off of the original 48 constellations documented by Ptolemaic back in the 2nd century, and he added up to 60 constellations in total, and some of them are still up there in his name. The 12 constellations he added are listed in the lower right-hand corner here. Some of them we'll talk more about later. Prior, as I said, prior to this publication, most star catalogs covered only the northern celestial sphere, which, given the amount of exploration that was going on, because this is like beginning into the peak colonialization period, having accurate star charts for being able to navigate was very important. So having a complete star chart of both northern and southern was hugely beneficial for many works. He compiled a lot of this book based off of work from Tycho Brahe for the northern sky. And the Dutch navigators, Petrus de Dory and Frederick Houtman, who I think Houtman we've cropped up a couple of other times during our Constellation of the Month talks. I might revisit him at a future date. Though he would use information from those two navigators to help build his star charts for the southern sky. in addition to that, he was, as part of his book, he would go on to catalog the top brightest stars in the constellation using a Greek or Latin letter. So this is where we get now we know Alpha Centauri, Alpha Persei, Omega Centauri, which is not a star, it's a globular cluster, which is an interesting discussion on its own. That's where all these designations come from. They were, this is their Bayer designation, which, as many of us recognize from the names, are still very much in use today. So one other thing that I think was instrumental was kind of flip-flopping back and forth when I was looking, that made the Uranometria so influential, is that he would include pictograms representing the individual asterisms like we see today, as in avatars of the figure that the constellation represented over the individual stars, like this here, which is depicting the huntsman Orion. So not it was quite an interesting piece of work all on its own, and we've talked about it several times over the last 3 years. So it is a very influential piece of work for early astronomers. And that's literally all I was able to dig up on him. So moving on to Nicolas de Lacaille, who was a much more interesting figure in terms of things that I was able to find. He was born, he is a French national, born in Rumilly, France, which is close to the Ardennes, in March of 1713. I'm running all my numbers together. His father was Charles Louis Lacaille, and his mother was Barbie Rudry, and he had 3 brothers, 5 older sisters, and 1 younger sister. Only 3 of his sisters would survive to adulthood. All of his other siblings died young. So he was from a very well-off family. They actually owned the Chateau Cour de Pré in Augsburg. So he was essentially a local noble. And his father was a very well-educated person. He was originally a soldier in the military, and he would eventually go on to pursue, after leaving the military, would go on to pursue other interests with a very strong passion for mechanics and engineering. And he invented several devices, but I could not find any information on exactly what devices he invented. But outside of that, his father would go on to participate in 2 different projects, which would almost completely bankrupt the family. The first was a paper mill that he tried to go into, and that project collapsed underneath him. And then a second project was a colonial project in, I think, a portion of South Africa, but the name escapes me and I didn't write it down. And that was abandoned early on, which further increased this debt. And that's a little bit important because we'll find out, as we'll see here in a second. So as part of growing up, Lacaille would grow into attend 2 Parisian universities, the Collège de Mans. We need to move the Zoom thing. There we go. So the College of Seine and the College of Lacaille. My French is very bad, so I'm going to butcher those. The second of these, he would only be able to attend because of a scholarship. And in both places, primarily studying rhetoric and philosophy. Again, kind of an interesting choice, but still a very popular topic for the day. While he was in school in 1731, his father died. I'm not quite sure of the cause, which left Lacaille taking on all of his father's debt in order to protect his sisters from being and keeping them safe. And so this essentially left Lacaille broke, penniless, and without a home, and very difficult to continue his schooling without the help of one of his father's friends, Louis Henry de Bourbon, who was able to help continue his schooling with financial assistance. So after about a year after his father's death, following the wishes of his father, had wanted Nicolas to pursue a degree in theology and enter the church. Kind of an interesting choice given the not the Renaissance, the Reformation. So an interesting choice during this time period. But Nicolas was very much wanting to respect the wishes of his father, and did enter did pursue a degree in theology. But while he was at Navarre, he would go on to self-teach himself geometry using Euclid's Elements, the default geometry textbook for like 3,000 years. And through this, he would go on to gain an interest in math and astronomy, which would eventually take over most of his primary studies. He would still go on to complete his degree in theology, but he became a lot more interested in math and astronomy over the next few years. After graduating, he would go on to enter the church as a deacon, and would eventually meet Giovanni Cassini's son and his grandson, who would go on to further Nicolas's pursuits in astronomy. The Cassini family eventually was able to land him a job at the Paris Observatory in 1735. While there, he would go on to collaborate with the grandson of Cassini, César, on a survey to revise the French meridian. This is primarily for navigational purposes, I believe. And over the course of like 3 or 4 years, they would go out wandering the French countryside and taking measurements of the French meridian, and published their results in 1734 as a book, whose the Meridian de France. But for some reason, it's not quite clear why, Cassini, César Francois would only credit Lacaille briefly in the preface, even though Lacaille was the one who did all of the math that was used to assemble this new work, which rubbed him in a very wrong way. He was not happy about this, and he would eventually write several letters to various acquaintances trying to extol his work and try to make up for this for what he felt was a slight. But it's not quite clear from what I was able to see how this impacted his relationship with the Cassinis. But this work, despite being underrepresented in this work, it was important because it was one of 2 works, that is a typo. There was 2 works that Isaac Newton would use to confirm his hypothesis that the Earth was actually squished and is flatter at the poles. Questions so far? Okay. So moving on from this work with the Cassinis, he would eventually be appointed as the chair, excuse me for the typo, of mathematics at the College of Mazarin in Paris in 1739. So this is slightly before his work with the Cassinis was actually published. And he would spend the rest of his professional career at the university. During this time, that he would write many books, which I'm not going to list here. If you are interested in seeing what he published, I do recommend just going out and Googling them. Many of them were considered very influential for their time and would go on to be published in multiple languages, which is very unusual, considering how much it cost to print books during this time period, because these are all etched metal plates that are used with the printing press, which is a lot easier for us to do today. But they would cover a variety of topics from astronomy, mechanics, and engineering, and math. So very, very well versed. You would almost consider him a polymath in today's parlance. Shortly after taking over his position as the chair of mathematics, the French Academy of Sciences would go on to elect him as an assistant astronomer in 1741 when he was 28 years old. And several years later, he would go on to be elected as an associate astronomer, which is considered a fairly prestigious position at the Paris Observatory. Using this influence, he would go on to request the Academy of Sciences to organize and fund an expedition to the Cape of Good Hope. This is where his the contributions that many of us as amateurs will come to know him by. Arriving in location in the Cape in 1751, he would spend the next several years there cataloging roughly 10,000 stars. This was the largest catalog of stars for its time, and impressive in such, and it's astounding that he was able to collect all of this data using, I think it was like a 3-inch refractor that was built at the Cape for him. This was exceeded the catalog that was assembled by Edmund Halley by several thousand. So it was the largest catalog of stars for its day. And a good chunk of these are still actually recognized by the catalog numbers that he designated, but I'm not quite, I didn't see what his name of his catalog was. I assume it actually still bears his last name of Lacaille, but I do not know off the top of my head. In addition to that, he would go on to identify and name 14 additional new southern constellations, all of which he would go and name after instruments that were scientific instruments. I have a slide coming up after this that'll list all 14. And this is in addition to the 12 that were written in the Uranometria by Johann Bayer. So but after returning from his expedition to the Cape of Good Hope in 1754, he would continue working at the college, as I mentioned, at the College of Mazarin until he died at the age of 49. Interestingly, shortly after he returned, it is from Lacaille that Halley's Comet would be given its name. He was actually the one who named it Halley's Comet after seeing some of Halley's work, which I thought was actually pretty cool. You know, it's one of those things where someone discovers something and somebody else names it. So for such an influential comet, it was like, huh. Most of his work on the expedition to Good Hope would actually not be published during his lifetime because he died about 8 years after he returned, which took a lot more longer to assemble the whole data. And so his catalog and his work from Good Hope would be published posthumously by Francis Bailey in 1834, I believe. Should have wrote that down. His cause of death was attributed to joint pains, which I did not actually know that this was possible, called attack of the gout. So it's can be extremely problematic if left untreated. It is also believed that one of the major contributions to his death was just him overworking himself. Today, he is buried at the College of Mazarin in Paris, France. And for the list of constellations that he officially documented and still bear their names today, this is the short list of all 14. So, and that is it for Nicolas Lacaille. Any questions or comments?
So he actually came up with these constellations, or did
he
somebody already
identified the
talked about them?
He identified the asterisms and named them.
Ah, okay.
But you do raise an excellent point in that I am not entirely clear if he was the sole identifier of these, or if he was building off somebody else. But from the gist of what I got from the articles is he identified and named all 14 of them.
Okay.
You mentioned the French meridian. I'm curious how they did that. Is that essentially a surveying project?
That's an excellent question, and I'm not quite sure how they would do that. Presumably, it would involve taking measurements of stars that's during the night, or in addition to solar measurements during the day, to try to get a sense of where high noon would fall. Would be my guess.
Doing transit measurements.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it's an excellent question. Any others?
So, Connor, there's only 12 listed here.
I must have. I may have a mistake there. I'll have to go back and double check. I may have accidentally deleted something because of a copy and paste error, because these were actually the names we now recognize them by. Some of them bear a slightly different name in his actual catalog, and they were listed twice. So it could be that some of these constellations were at one point 2 different constellations that have since been merged.
Okay.
Or I have a typo and I got over aggressive in deleting things, which I'll presumably lean towards the latter of me just deleting things I shouldn't have. But excellent. Thank you for pointing that out. I apologize for the mistake. Cool. And with that, Gus, we'll turn it over to you.
All right. Let me figure out how to do the screen share. I want to pick that one. Share that. Okay, you guys see that one, right?
Little glasses, Gus.
What's that?
Little glasses.
Yeah. The magic of what do they call these things? Visual effects or something like that. Yeah. They're just my sunglasses, my regular reading glasses with a little thing thrown on top. Okay. You guys can see that's first topic of the month for June 2023. Okay. Connor had asked me some time back to if I could do a presentation and on binocular targets. So I thought, well, I could put together a whole mess of stars and show you what they look like, but maybe I'll expand on it a little bit more and I'll show you some of the stuff that I did on my pair of binoculars and some other topics that I found interesting that I didn't know about the binoculars. So we'll take it from there. Oh, and those who don't know me, I'm Gus Gomez. I've been in the club for 5 years now or something like that. So, and I do binoculars and telescopes out at Timpa. Okay, first thing, when I first thought of astronomy, I never would have thought about using binoculars. It's like, well, wait a minute, you know, that's a good point. I thought astronomy, you do that with telescopes. No, you can also do a lot of good and exciting viewing using a pair of binoculars. Now the binoculars, well, for one thing, they're portable. I go to El Paso to visit my family out there. And one night I was driving out there about 10, 11 o'clock at night. It was a clear night. And I was looking out, I said, wow, that looks pretty neat. So I just pulled off in the off ramp, parked where it was safe, pulled out my binoculars, which I had in my truck, and started doing some stargazing there. So it makes it easy. If you got a pair of binoculars, throw them in your truck, your car, and you're ready to go do some stargazing at night. Again, binoculars, they can be low cost, but again, you get what you pay for. Another thing with binoculars, you don't get not that inverting view, like in my telescope. When I look at something, if I'm looking east, north will be to my left side, but when I'm looking through the telescope, it's on my right side. So not that it really matters when you're looking at stars, but somehow it just flips everything around. With binoculars, you get what you see, you know, or you see what you get. So that's another, I guess, advantage of binoculars. And you can use them for the other stuff. For example, if you want to do bird watching, you can do that. You can use them if you're into hunting for spotting, you know, if you're looking for elk or whatever. There's also a daytime use for them. So that's another advantage of binoculars. Again, the disadvantage is, well, since they don't have the magnification of some of the bigger telescopes, there are a lot of deep sky objects that you probably won't be able to see very well, if at all. One thing I noticed was also stability. I have a large set of binoculars, and the weight, mine are the 25 by 100s, and they weigh close to 9 pounds, which is okay if you're holding them up for about 10, 15 seconds. Then after that, you got to put them down because they're just a little bit too heavy. But I've come up with some solutions for that. There's 2 basic type of binoculars. The what's called the well, people would claim, well, there's also night vision and all. Yeah, but if the ones that are more commonly out in you see out in the field, one is called the roof prism binoculars. They're compact. They got fewer internal parts. but sometimes the prism alignment over here on the right-hand side, if that's a little bit off, you're gonna end up with some poor imaging there. So one of the things I've read when I was researching this is if you're gonna go with this type of binocular, don't scrimp, pay a little bit extra and get some good quality ones. And you'll end up with something with as good of an image as you do with the other type, the Porro prism binocular. It was invented by an Italian inventor, Ignacio Porro, back in 1850, I believe, in that time frame there. It allows for better stereoscopic imaging, but when you're looking at the sky, it really doesn't matter, right? But that's more if you're looking, again, if you're looking at birds or, mountains and stuff like that. Surprisingly, they're less expensive than the roof prism binoculars. They're less compact because now they're wider. Now you have to make it a little bit wider for the two prisms. There's more moving parts. And it's also, because of that, there's also make it harder to water and dust proof. So the Porro prism is the ones you see more often in, in the war movies, or the U-2 captain sitting up on the bridge or standing on the bridge. He's got these giant binoculars, and they're this type of a binocular. Targets, some of the targets that are available, well, the limiting factor for the targets is the magnification. In my binoculars, they're the 25 by 100. Now these numbers, the 25 represents the magnification. The 100 is the aperture, is the size of the lens up front. And in astronomy, aperture is everything, so the wider of an aperture you have, the more light you'll be collecting, the better you'll be able to see. So if you ever see a pair of binoculars, they're 8 by 50s or whatever, that means it's an 8 times magnification with a 50 millimeter lens up front. Now, one of the a good source of targets I found is the Astronomical League binoculars programs. There's quite a few of them in there. The ones that I've got highlighted are the ones that I've completed, and they give you a whole list and they tell you where to go find them, or you go and find them yourself. And they're usually stars that are easy to find because they are binoculars. You don't need any magnification to go out and find them. The one that surprised me was the urban one, but since in the urban observing program, you are looking through very polluted skies. So I would see where they may add the targets in there that are larger and brighter, so you could see them through the haze of the light in the urban sky. So you could see them with binoculars. And then there's several other ones. The Earth orbiting satellite, that's the one I'm looking to start looking into that one. That looks like an interesting one where you're looking at satellites as they're flying over the sky, over you or overhead when you're out observing. So that's just if you need targets or want to look at some of these things, this could be a good source to go find something to look at. And unlike the telescope programs, the binocular ones, there are fewer targets to find. For example, I think, I may be wrong, but I think Messier, you only need 90 out of the 106, I believe, but I may be wrong. But
I don't even think they need that.
Yeah, there may not be that many. Just because some of those Messier objects, they are a little trickier to find, even with telescope. So they would back off on the quantity that you have to find in order to get your certificate. So this is a good source if you're looking for stuff to look at when you're out in the night sky with your binoculars. Now, one of the things that I had when I bought my binoculars, again, they were big. It's kind of hard to keep them, pick them up with my arms, and they can't get tiring, and they move around a lot. So it's kind of hard to see. So one of the things I did is I went and bought this thing, which is called a parallelogram mount. So it basically attaches down here to your tripod, and your binoculars sit up here. This is meant actually for smaller binoculars than mine. It runs about $150, tripod not included, of course. And so I thought, well, yeah, mine is a 25 by 100. It might be a little bit heavier. I went ahead and bought it and said, well, I'll take a shot at it. But notice that in this picture, this mounting bracket back here, it runs perpendicular to the binoculars. In my case, as I'll show you later, that is not the way mine is set up. So, but I'll show it to you later. My mount, for example, has this rod that I my tripod has this rod that connects the mount to the tripod. It turns out the thread is not the same as it is for this parallelogram mount that I had. So I had to go in there and come up with my own. And it turns out that this parallelogram, it uses a standard thread. So I thought, well, hey, I could make my own connecting rod there and not have to use the one that came with my mount and my tripod. So that's pretty much what I did. It's basically a long bolt. I had marked it where as I stuck it up through from the bottom all the way up, and I put it in through the parallelogram to the where it connects, backed it off a couple of turns so I wouldn't be hitting the top of it, and marked it. I said, okay, this is how high I wanted to go through. And I added a piece of a spacer. This is just an aluminum tube that I had in my junk box. I cut it to size, put it through there. I got a washer, a bolt and a washer, and a little wing nut. Wing nut, that way when I reach underneath, I can use that to tighten this bolt without having to, reach in there with pliers or whatever. So that made it a lot easier to connect my new parallelogram to my old tripod. And again, this is something I just went and bought. A lot of this stuff I had already in my junk drawer, and I just need to go buy a bolt. This is what, maybe a couple of bucks over at Home Depot. So it wasn't that expensive to make a bolt to attach my new parallelogram to my existing tripod. So, oh, this came out sideways. I didn't mean that. Okay, well, this image over here, let me back up. Let's see, how do I back up? Shift tab, or I go like this. Yeah, this is what my setup looks like now. And again, notice my binoculars, they have a rod that goes down, or a tube down the middle. And this is where you connect it versus it being perpendicular to the binoculars. Mine runs parallel to the tubes. So this is how mine hooks up in there. And this is my existing tripod. And this is the new parallelogram that I bought. And this is the extension. There's the weight out here. And you notice it extended all the way to the end. Well, it turns out that's not enough weight for these binoculars, even though these are as far into the middle to the fulcrum here as I could get them. It still wasn't enough. I picked that up and these binoculars just flop back down. Even tightening these bolts is not enough, and it'll just come back down. So the new mount, it didn't have the counterweight to support my big binoculars that I had. So I thought, well, I'll make an extension to it. So turns out that the weight on the end of the parallelogram, it's a 4-inch diameter. I had a 4-inch piece of PVC pipe, and it fit in there just like it was like a glove. It just went right in. I thought, this is it right here. And I had a white one, which is nice because at night you'll be able to see it. You won't be bumping into it. So I added on this end, here on the left side, there's a cap that I screwed in. I had an old scuba weight. Since I'm into scuba diving, I had a weight. I threw it in there, and then I had the piece of wadding. I could have used foam, whatever. I just had a plastic bag laying around. I grabbed it, I threw it in there, and then I attached all of this, and I put it on the end of the weight. And now I had enough counterweight to hold my heavy binoculars there. You notice it's not extended all the way out. It's sort of in the middle, so it kept this rod right here from too much tension on it and bending it or anything like that. So that worked out really well. So that's what I have my setup right now. But again, I run into this problem. Mine is connected perpendicular to the tubes, which means that this rotating arm here, that's as far down as it's going to go. So my binoculars can't see anything below this, what is that, 20, 30 degrees or something? So I was like, well, I don't know about that. So my hacksaw took care of that. I just went in there and I cut a chunk of metal that sits right here. Oops, let me back up again. Shift tab or swipe it. Right here in this piece, I just got a hacksaw and cut it out so that this whole piece rotates all the way down. So now I'm able to see it, anything from the horizon up, I'm able to get a good view. So that took care of that. One of the other things I did on my telescope, is I replaced the red dot pointer with a laser pointer. Again, this has to do with telescopes. This is one of the best things I ever did to my telescope, because now instead of having to look through my red dot pointer to go find my object as I'm slewing across the sky, I just sit back and watch this laser beam go across the sky and till I'm in the area or till I'm pointing at the star that I want to see. So that was a good a modification I did to my telescope, which meant now that I now had a red dot finder left over. And one of the things I always found with my binoculars is, am I really looking where I think I'm looking? If I'm looking for a star between two other stars, am I really there? Because of the magnification, I'm sort of looking, has like a tunnel vision effect. So am I really there? So I had to sort of move around and what am I looking for? Is it there? Is it there? So what I did is I got this red dot finder, a paper clip, and then I attached it to this rod that runs down the middle of my telescope right here. I added a little bit of some foam padding just to keep this thing a little bit held in there to keep it from flopping around. So I said, well, let's put that together with my binoculars and I should have a red dot finder on my binoculars. And I don't know if you can see this very well, but there it is sitting on top of that rod that sits down the middle. And now I can just look through when I'm looking for an object with my binoculars on my parallelogram, I just look at the red dot, I move the red dot around till I find the star. And then when I'm looking through my binoculars, I know I'm there. So that was another little simple modification that I did to my parabinoculars. Now, you may not be able to do it to all of them. I thought, well, maybe I could attach it over here on one of the lenses or something with a clamp or something. But when I looked at this and said, wait a minute, I got a clip here, I got a red dot finder, throw that in there and see what happens. And it seems to work very well, except that once in a while, I'll go in, I'll hit it and I'll tap it. Now it's out of alignment, but it's easy to put back. You just reach over and realign it and you're there. So those are just a couple of the things that I did to modify my binoculars or my tripods, or add stuff to my tripod to be able to use them with my heavy binoculars, that now I don't have to worry about holding 9 pounds up in the sky or when I'm looking at stars and stuff like that. So that seemed to work out very well. Again, my tripod, the parallelogram doesn't sit as high as my mount for my telescope. So what I did is first night I was out there, I went and extended the legs, found where it was a comfortable spot, and then I just marked it with one of these, a marker of some sort, and then every time I go out to Timpa, I have the tripod sitting on my tailgate on my truck. I just extend the legs out to where I had already marked it, and then it's ready to go. I don't have to go back and recalibrate how high do I have to put my tripod so that the parallelogram sits at the right level for me to do some good viewing with my binoculars. So that was very simple. That's a no-brainer on that one there. Now, one of the other things that I ran into while I was doing the reading up on this, at this website down here, binocularsky.com, this is very interesting. I didn't know that. Did you know that binoculars can go out of collimation? It's like, really? Basically, one of the tubes is not looking in the same direction as the other one, and you get double image when you're looking through them. Now, the guy who wrote this article, he said, there is a way to fix it, but if your binoculars are under warranty, return them to the vendor. But if you're going to be doing your own messing around with your binoculars, be very careful. And in this article where the guy explained how to do that, he kept saying, I'm not responsible if you mess up your binoculars. But you're on your own now, but I'm going to show you how to do it. And it involves moving a couple of screws near the front and the back of the binocular so that you align the prisms, set them back into alignment. And usually they will go out of alignment if you drop them or something like that happens. So there is a way to do it without having to send them back in. But he recommended just send them back to the where you bought them. And if they're under warranty, that's even better. Now, how do you check to see if your binoculars are collimated? Well, it's very simple. You take one of the eyepieces and focus it on a star. The other eye, not eyepiece, the other eye tube, I guess you could call it, and defocus it so that you end up with a big blob. And if they're not concentric, then you know you're not collimated. See how these on the left side, the dot, the star is not in the middle of that circle. On the right side, that shows you that is collimated. So that is one way to check to see, are my binoculars both looking at the same thing? So it's a quick little test. And again, if they're not, there is a procedure where you can go in there and find the little adjustment screws and mess with it, but they're going to be telling you over and over, we're not responsible if you screw it up. So it's something that you can do on your own if you wanted to do that. But that was interesting. I never thought about that binoculars would actually require collimation. It's like, okay, that's interesting. Now, one of the other things that I learned when looking at this is that there is such a thing as a batten-off mask, like the ones you use on telescopes, that you can use on your binoculars. These are actually made for cameras when you're doing, I guess, night photography for focusing your camera. And you buy one, or they get two of them. I went up for my binoculars, 100 millimeter aperture, and they go for about $10 to $15 on eBay each. I think you could buy two of them for 17 bucks or something like that. It's basically a big piece of plastic with this pattern on it, and they clip onto the end of your eyepiece if you're on your camera, or you can adapt them for your binoculars. Now notice how one of them is aligned, I guess, north-south, and the other one is east-west. That is what's called a cross batten-off mask. And not only can you do your your focusing, you can also check for your collimation using something like that. And if they're not collimated, you'll see the two images in focus, but they're not on top of each other like they are over here on the right-hand side. If it looks like that like over here on the right side, then you know you're collimated and you're in focus. So that was something else I'm going to be buying in the next couple of days for my binoculars. So that was kind of interesting. I didn't know that they actually made a batten-off mask for cameras. I never needed to know that, but now I do, and you can adapt them for your binoculars. So that was something I found at that website. It's called the binocularsky.com. It's not wanting to advertise for the website, but they've got a lot of good stuff in there, like reviews of binoculars. They've got one of the pages where you can type in what it is you're looking for, a night, NGC 1234, whatever, and it'll show you in the sky where it is. They'll give you a little map and show you, these are some of the bright objects around, and here's where it is. So it's a pretty interesting website. I sort of came across it when I was doing the research for this stuff. So this was really interesting. I really like this. So I'm going to be getting me one of those things for I don't have one for my telescope, but I'm going to have one for my binoculars. So that I think pretty much wraps up my discussion here on telescopes. Again, it's a very inexpensive hobby to do binocular sky gazing. This is a website that I found some of that interesting stuff. I'm sure there's others, but this one I just stumbled onto that one. It's like, oh, this is pretty good. I got to bring that up. And now we do have a resident, I believe, expert, William Clark. I think he is into binoculars. He's got like 3 or 4 binocular setups in his backyard. I didn't include his name on here because I didn't ask him for permission if I could, but I'll mention just his name. He had been to some of our AFSIG meetings before and did a presentation on binocular viewing. So that's William Clark. He's around that. So again, that is what I've got on binoculars. I hope this was useful to you guys. So any questions or?
Great presentation, Gus. It was very useful.
Yeah, it was. Again, this is just stuff that I did to my binoculars. Mine are a little bit different from the normal ones. So I said, well, I should be able to use my old tripod or my existing tripod with that parallelogram. That comes really handy, especially with a heavy binoculars like that you set them up, and once you got them up there, you just put them there, and it makes it easier to move around and do stuff like that. So again, just some ideas, and that you can save some money here and there and make your own stuff. So
Gus,
yes.
I had the same issue with my parallelogram and in not being able to go down below a certain point. And so I took it up to Starzona, and Dean took a hacksaw to it.
There you go.
Yeah, so I had the same thing done, but I didn't have to do all the hard work. And I also found that I could use my my old viewfinder for my telescope on my binoculars. So
Okay. You were able to attach it?
yeah, I was able to attach it, but I haven't actually tried it because I couldn't use it because I couldn't use the darn parallelogram. But now that I've got that going, maybe I can get
Well,
a binocular program.
yeah, well, we're going out to Tampa next Friday, so bring them out and.
Yeah, well, I'm involved in something else this weekend. I won't be able to go, but it's otherwise I'd be there.
All right. Okay, well, that was my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thanks,
Okay.
Gus.
Sure.
And any last minute questions before we head out? Before we dismiss? I don't have. Oh, I should actually raise this because we're going to get ahead of myself. I do not have any presentations on the schedule for next month. So, Doug, I can't remember if you reached out to me for presenting in July, or if I'm just getting confused.
No, but I can come up with something.
I talked with Stephen, and he had mentioned that he could be presenting for August for the main for a topic, but he couldn't make the July meeting. Do I have any other people who would be willing to volunteer to present something for an astronomer for the July or August meetings?
Which do you want me to do? Main topic or astronomer?
Which would you prefer?
I don't know. I can come up with something. Either one.
Since you were volunteering first, I figured I'd let you get first pick.
I don't know.
Okay. So in that case, if I can get a yes, Pete.
Yeah, if Doug takes the main topic, I'll take an astronomer, but I've been missing out on some. You gotta give me the astronomer.
Okay, I'll throw some names your way. Do you want me to put you down for July or for August?
Oh, we'll go ahead with July, the same proviso if I can go second, because yeah, if Doug does the main topic, he'd go first anyhow.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, it shouldn't be an issue
That looks creepy.
unless someone else wants to jump in. I wouldn't want to prevent someone else from taking an opportunity to present one of the astronomers. I guess not then, so. Yeah, throw me a couple of names, Connor, and we'll pick one or two and we'll go from there.
We'll do. I'll contact you probably next week. I'm packing for a trip to the Grand Canyon with a friend.
That's
from
fine.
school.
That's fine. Yeah.
He wanted to go check out the Grand Canyon Star Party, so I'll be up there this weekend.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, if the clouds don't ruin everything, we'll see. So, and with that, go ahead and stop the